Rabbi?
Yeah?
Isn't it? It's sermon time now, yeah?
Yeah, it's sermon time.
So are you going to start?
I think they're real.
What?
I think they're real.
Who's real?
Them!
No, they're not real.
No, I think they're real. They're not cardboard cutouts this year.
You think?
All right, I know how to check. They'll respond if I say Shana Tova. They always respond to Shana Tova. Okay. Let's see. All right, let's try it. Ready? Shana Tova.
Oh, my goodness. Maybe they are real. Okay, let me try something. Okay. L'tor vador. L'tor vador. Oh, my gosh. They're definitely real.
Whoa.
They're real.
Wow. No holiday heads this year. We've got real, live people.
Real, live people.
Wow. Man. Rabbi Wexler, can you believe that? Rabbi Wexler? Rabbi Wexler? Oh, no!
I knew he was too good to be true.
He's okay. He's right behind us. There you go. You remember those, right? No? Yes? Good. Good. Well, those holiday heads were fun last year. But I have to admit that it is much nicer to hear your laughter in our sanctuary. It's the sound of celebration. It's the sound of joy. It's the sound of community. And I hope that all of you on the live stream were laughing and experiencing that sense of joy that comes with being part of community as well. Well, we've had our good times this last year. I've missed laughing, singing, and celebrating all together. You know, last summer, I started writing a sermon about all the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic. And as last Rosh Hashanah approached, I realized too soon. So I filed it away, thinking, at least I'll have my sermon done for next year. It was looking good until the end of July. But then, as cases started to rise once more, I realized that it was still too soon. We are all still learning how to live in the uncertainty. And the nature of our experience keeps changing. From lockdowns to quarantines to masks to no masks and back to masks again, we are constantly in a state of transition. Transitions is what we mark today. Rosh Hashanah is a holiday that celebrates the transition from one year to the next. Our Jewish New Year is a time for us to look inward. We do tshuva, reflect on our words and our deeds. And Judaism sees transitions as moments of tremendous potential. They are opportunities for reflection, learning, and growth. Yet they can also be moments of anxiety, stress, and frustration. In addition to the transitions imposed by COVID, there are many other major transitions that confront us. Climate change is transitioning us to a world with more extreme weather, floods, fires, and tornadoes. Cryptocurrency is causing a transition in banking. Countries like Afghanistan are going through painful transitions. And politics here and in Israel seem to be in a constant state of transition. And of course, there's also anti-Semitism on both the right and the left that has been transitioning more into the mainstream. And with it has come the unfounded criticism of Israel in progressive circles that has caused some to transition their loyalties, even when it comes to ice cream. What it means to be part of a community is also undergoing a transition. With our virtual options, moving out of town no longer means that you have to find a new synagogue. Our members have attended services, classes, and programs from Florida, Center City, the Shore, Israel, and elsewhere around the world. We can stay connected to each other virtually, like many of you are doing at this very moment. And there are also the transitions that we're experiencing in our own lives. Some have become parents. Some have lost loved ones. There have been job changes, upsizing and downsizing, sending a child to college, spending more time alone, spending more time together. What has changed in your life this past year? How has it affected you and your family? How do these transitions make you feel? Scared? Excited? Confused? Exhausted? All of the above? The great psychologist William James once said, "Life is in the transitions." That's because it is during these moments that we find our greatest opportunities for learning and growth, just like we try to do today on Rosh Hashanah. James's quote inspired the title of Bruce Feiler's newest book, Life is in the Transitions. Feiler argues that people are experiencing more transitions in their lives than ever before, and he wrote this book before the pandemic. He tallies 52 different sources of conflict, upheaval, or stress a person can face. I'm not going to name them all, but here are a few of them. They can be voluntary, like losing weight or starting a company, or involuntary, being fired or discovering a child has special needs. From the personal, getting sober, to losing a loved one, to the collective, joining a social movement, or enduring a pandemic. The ways we manage and live through these transitions recalibrate our life stories. They are, as Feiler writes, autobiographical occasions, when we simply must take the opportunity to revisit, revise, and restart our internal autobiographers, making some tweaks, adding a chapter or two, elevating or devaluating certain themes. And this is what we do today in our Sefer Chaim, in our Book of Life. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. V'yad kol adam chotem bo, and each of us sign it with our deeds. Today we begin a review of our Sefer Chaim. We consider the triumphs and the setbacks, the love and the loss. Yet this is not simply an exercise in remembering. Rather, it's an opportunity to make changes in our autobiographies, big and small. Our tradition hardwires this time for transitions into our calendar each year. On Rosh Hashanah, we seek to find life in the transitions. As I look back on my Sefer Chaim from this past year, the moment of transition that I found most meaningful was celebrating Yael's bat mitzvah in March. A bat mitzvah, of course, is a transition itself as a child becomes a Jewish adult. The celebration that we looked forward to for 13 years did not happen as we pictured. And I know that many of you experienced this as well. Perhaps it was a bar bat mitzvah, or a wedding, or a funeral, or a graduation, or high holiday services. Not how you pictured it. Still, Yael's bat mitzvah was beautiful. She did a wonderful job, and so many of you, along with our family and friends from around the world, got to celebrate with us virtually as we Zoomed her service from our living room. What was most impressive to me was how Yael, like all of our B'nai Mitzvah this year, displayed incredible resilience. She learned her Torah and Haftorah readings, led the service, shared a beautiful Devar Torah, and together we created a different kind of celebration. Yes, even the rabbi's family can get caught up talking about the party. But this process reminded us of the true meaning of these important milestone moments. Community, tradition, family, celebration, joy, even when our expectations are forced to change. That's being resilient. That's finding life in the transitions. Resilience is an essential attribute for living through transitions. But what does it mean to be resilient? The Oxford Dictionary defines resilience as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. But there is another understanding of resilience that I think better speaks to our moment. It comes from a woman who experienced a much more traumatic transition. In her book, The Road to Resilience, Sherry Mandel writes about how her son, Kobe, and his friend, Yosef, were stoned to death during the Second Intifada in Israel in May of 2001. Kobe and Yosef were just 13 years old. Her first book, The Blessing of a Broken Heart, reflected on that tragedy. In this book, she shares how she and her family were able to rebuild their lives after her son's murder. She credits resilience. Here's how she defines it. Jewish philosophy teaches that resilience is not overcoming. Rather, it's becoming more, becoming our fullest, deepest selves as a result of adversity. We don't escape, but contemplate and reshape. We don't leap over troubles as if they don't exist. We allow them to be our teachers. We experience resilience when we are enlarged rather than diminished by our challenges. When facing adversity causes us to change, to grow, to become better. And Mandel points out that a Hebrew word for resilience is chosen, which is related to the Hebrew word chisun. Does anyone know what chisun means? Chisun means vaccine. Let's make that our Hebrew word of the day. Repeat after me. Chisun. Good. You really are real. Chisun. The word for vaccine in Hebrew is related to the word for resilience because vaccines help our bodies learn how to fight off illness, and they also keep us and others safe. Unfortunately, there is no vaccine against tragic loss, and there's been a lot of that in this year of pandemic, and it's impacted all of us. There is also no vaccine to cure the ills of our society, which are also on our mind this Rosh Hashanah. Over the last few years, we have been facing a transition to ever greater polarization in our country, even when it comes to following expert advice to combat the pandemic, such as wearing masks and getting vaccinated. I am proud that back in July, we required vaccination for everyone joining us here in the sanctuary today. And we did this because getting vaccinated is a mitzvah, a commandment. And if we are to be Jews of integrity, then we must live our values, and our Jewish values are clear. Anything that we can do to protect our own health and the health of others, we must do. That's what we've done throughout the pandemic and what we'll continue to do to make sure we keep our community safe as best as possible. Now that we've all gotten our chisun, our vaccines, we need to work on our chosen, our ability to be resilient in the transitions. Fortunately, resilience runs deep within us. The Jewish people are masters of resilience. We have always been able to choose life in our transitions. Oftentimes people ask, what is the secret to Jewish survival? Today I'd like to share with you two possible answers. The first is how we share our story, and the second is our ability to respond to moments of transition with innovation and creativity. First, sharing our story. We all know the old joke that sums up every Jewish holiday. They tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. By telling and retelling our stories, we teach ourselves and our children and grandchildren what it means to be resilient. We will build Sukkot in a couple of weeks to commemorate our ancestors' difficult journey through the desert. We light Hanukkah candles to recall the Maccabees' triumph over the Assyrian Greeks. On Purim, we celebrate Queen Esther's victory over Haman and the Persians. And on Passover, we see ourselves as going from slavery to freedom, just like our ancestors before us. Studies have shown that the more children know about their family's history, the stronger their sense of control over their lives and the higher their self-esteem. Hearing stories of victories and defeats provides a great measure of resilience. By telling our people's story and by identifying ourselves within that story, we become more resilient. Here is one modern story of resilience that really touched me. It caught my attention because parts of this story overlap with my family's story, as I imagine they do with yours as well. Leon Koppelman passed away last month at the age of 97. He was the last known surviving fighter of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Leon was born in Poland. When he was 16, the Nazis sent his family to the Warsaw Ghetto. His mother was taken to Treblinka, and he never saw her again. Leon became active in the Jewish resistance movement, and he and his fellow fighters attacked German soldiers until April 1943, when the Nazis entered the ghetto and put down the uprising. Leon and his comrades were forced to surrender. He was sent to a work camp, but he was freed by the Polish resistance and joined their efforts against the Germans. He was captured again, escaped, and then after the war used false identities to illegally board a ship to the land of Israel. And once there, Leon could not yet rest. He joined the nascent Israeli army, fought in the War of Independence, and finally, when that ended, he met Chava, and they married for almost 70 years. They had 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren, which Koppelman would often say constituted his greatest victory over the Nazis. Leon Koppelman epitomized Jewish resilience. Like so many of his generation, he overcame tremendous adversity, major transitions, to help defeat the Nazis, found the State of Israel, and build a family. His story is part of our people's story. It inspires us to find life in our transitions. Now for the second secret of Jewish survival. We have a history of responding to moments of transition with tremendous creativity and innovation. The destruction of the Second Temple brought innovations from the rabbis in the Mishnah and the Talmud. The expulsion from Spain led to the mysticism of Sfat. The Enlightenment brought the innovations of the Orthodox, conservative, and Reform movements, and the Holocaust was followed just 3 years later by the birth of the State of Israel. This is what our ancestors were able to do, and their example inspires us today as we build upon their story, our story. During this time of transition, as we gather together to pray for life and reflect on our lives, we recognize that we too are creating new and innovative ways for us to perpetuate our tradition. We are connecting virtually and in person, learning to pray and learn together as with Jews around the world. We may not yet be certain of what to write in our book of life, but we know that we are not the first generation in history to face this uncertainty. And the truth is, even with all of our transitions, in many ways, our lives are much more certain than our ancestors. Like those who came before us, we know that if we stay true to our values, Then we'll be able to respond with the best story that we can. Then we too will be able to find life in the transitions. At the end of her book, Sherry Mandel shares a story of a question she was asked in a radio interview. Listen to how she responds. The host asked me, "I understand that after a loss, you have to find a new sense of normal. Is that true?" I thought about it, Sherry writes, and then answered, "No, it's not true. Normal isn't enough. One has to find a new extraordinary." We too seek to find a new extraordinary, to uncover a deeper sense of self, of responsibility to others, of awareness of the role God in our tradition plays in making our lives meaningful. How will your life's transitions bring you to a new extraordinary? Will it include more kindness, generosity, and patience? Will it mean more holy moments celebrating Shabbat and holidays? Love of Israel, love of family, compassion for those in need? What about your new extraordinary will make you proud? What about it will make your children and your grandchildren proud? How will our stories help them find resilience in their lives? How will you find life in your transitions? When you gather together today for lunch, in person or virtually, or around the dinner table tonight, ask each other these questions. Share stories of resilience. Share how you got through a challenging time and how you are getting through this time. Tell each other what the new extraordinary will look like for you. When we recall our history, tell our stories, and share our hopes and our dreams, we begin to find new life in the transitions. Hopefully, next year I'll get to use that sermon and be able to reflect more fully on the lessons we've learned during this time of transition. Today, however, I do have a good sense of what will make up our new extraordinary. That's because we have already begun experiencing it. It is each of us, as part of this Kila Kedosha, this sacred and caring community, that will bring us into our new extraordinary. It is the resilience of parents who prioritize their children's Jewish education in person and online. It is the resilience of our seniors to learn new skills and to find ways to gather safely. It is the resilience of our teachers who make our classrooms safe and engaging environments. It is the resilience of our leaders and our volunteers who continue to give of their time and resources to keep our community thriving. It is the resilience of our staff whose creativity and commitment to Jewish learning and living is unparalleled. And it is your resilience, each and every one of you, in being committed to celebrating Rosh Hashanah with us together as a TBS family, in person, online, outside in the tent, down at the stream for Tashlich this afternoon. All of you are demonstrating incredible resilience at this moment of transition. All of you are finding life in the transitions, one stage, one step, one moment at a time. Our chosen, our resilience, is our best chisun, our best vaccine against the perils of the transitions that we face. Our resilience in the face of transitions will allow us to create a new extraordinary as we rededicate ourselves to our values and to our community this year. Together, we can find meaning. Together, we can find joy. Together, we can find new life in the transitions this year. Shana Tova.